Hello, everyone. Welcome to those of you for arriving. Very good to see some familiar faces.
Hello.
Hello, hello,
Hello.
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 I see I see some faces I haven't met before. Others I know all of you very well. So welcome to this. This is the second edition of the second episode of the Salon of Classical Architecture in the season of 2025. And today we are going to continue with our theme, with our set of lessons on resources for classical architecture. Share the screen. Where is it? I guess that all of you can see this screen now. And going to give some minutes for more of your colleagues to come. What a lot signing in. Again, if you cannot come to the salon, the meeting will be published. We are going to have a YouTube channel to upload all these classes, and we are managing the way of showing it so that its privacy is protected and at the same time everyone can see it. So I see two people at least that I haven't met in the past or haven't been here in other editions. So three people I would say. I mean, I know very well Andreas and Fernando, but I'd like to Dario, Federico, and Nicole to introduce yourselves a little bit. Unusual as a general rule, if you cannot write for whichever reason, because you might be on the car, on public transport, you don't want to talk, you are very shy, you can use the chat. So it's either or. But I want you to introduce to see what brings you here. What do you want to do, and how can we help you?
Yeah. Well, I am.
So, ladies first, Nicole, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I was in the last class also.
Okay, you went to the last class. You
IBAT, Brazil.
Okay, yeah, we have a lot of people coming from the IBAT. I don't know how many exactly today, but other times we have a lot of people coming from the IBAT. The IBAT is for all the rest of the people here. The IBAT is the Instituto Brasileiro de Arquitectura Tradicional. It's like the INBAU, the equivalent of INBAU Brazil. Very, very interesting, all the things that Bruno Pereña and his team are doing there to promote traditional and classical architecture in Brazil. And I collaborate with them quite a lot. So this is also open to everyone. I mean, many of you come from different social media. We have several WhatsApp groups where we participate. Some of us just are on the same group, so they are only on certain groups, or other just find us through social media. We do publish a lot on Instagram, a little bit on Facebook for those who still use Facebook, and probably at some point we might jump to LinkedIn if we ever understand what the hell happens in LinkedIn. So thank you very much for coming, Federico.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Federico. I'm from Mexico.
Uh-huh.
This is the first time that I am in one of your class. I saw the link in an Instagram post, and I began to follow you, Pablo, and you are following me too in the last day.
Perfect. That's good. That's good. I mean, I am always ashamed if someone comes here and I follow you and they know you don't follow me. Oh God, I mean that's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Thanks God, I am the type of people that I follow everyone who comes following me, even the spammers. I follow them. Then when they come offering me the whatever services or pyramidal scheme they're offering is when I unblock and leave.
Yeah.
So Dario.
Yeah, I am from Venezuela, but I am studying at the UPV, which is the Polytechnic University of Valencia, and I am new in this. Let's say, like I have been doing like a normal architecture education, let's call it like that, for the last 6 years. But for the last year, I have been trying to get more into traditional and classical, and I think I am just starting now. So
That's
I
good.
would like to do that in the future. And
Okay.
yeah, we know each
So
other from before, Pablo, a
yeah,
little bit.
I know.
Yeah.
Now, when you have told me Venezuela and Valencia, I have said,
Yeah.
okay, I know you. I mean, I hope that Federico is okay. And I mean, I need to bring Federico because he's always so busy. He doesn't answer my emails, or probably they don't
Yeah.
arrive. I need to tell him about all this and
Mhm.
bring him, because he's great. He's one of the few ones in Spain that outside the big core in Madrid that is doing classical and traditional architecture, promoting it, etc. So I need to bring him to do more stuff today.
Yeah, I think he will be happy. He will be glad.
I'll reach him. Do you still see him or not?
What?
Do you still see Federico or not or not much?
Yeah, no, we're still
You
writing each other emails about
yeah,
the paper that I was doing.
okay. I mean, if you want, then maybe later on you can tell the group what you're researching, because I mean, people here, we are. It's more or less it's a close community, and we all talk about classical architecture. Maybe some people can help you. We can give you extra references,
Yeah,
etc. So please feel free
that would
at the
be.
end to discuss and bring ideas, because that's what we do at the end. So for everyone who hasn't been before, what we do here, we do first one small lecture, which changes every week. And then we do a question and answer time, a tertulia, basically. And people, if they want, they can bring their project. And I will give them my opinion on them, and everyone can give their opinion on them. Sometimes the projects are nice, other times they are, let's say, interesting. But today we are going to, I mean, this is part of the objectives that we had, because we started with the classic Salon of Classical Architecture about a year ago with Álvaro Pérez from Escuela de Arquitectura Clásica, who will probably join us in a sec. And we started in a bit of a regular but a bit chaotic way last year at the beginning, and we were doing exercises, and people were not doing them, and we were talking, and people were not doing stuff. So we decided to provide to everyone some resources of classical architecture, resources and tools in classical architecture, so that everyone can learn by themselves. Because those who know me from for a while, you know that I also teach a long course of 150-hour course on classical architecture online at the Classic Planning Institute. So this is the glimpse. This is like the preliminaries that you need to know if you want to do the big long course with us at the CPI, which all of you are invited to apply and to attend. So in that regard, this is basically advices, tips, and as we are going to progress, the things will get more complex. Last week we had the introduction to the classical orders, which is also a big weekly, well, no, actually a monthly lecture that they do for free at the Classic Planning Institute for everyone to come. This Wednesday we have another one for free at the Classic Planning Institute on Introduction to Islamic Architecture, which has been deliberately omitted from this program, because if you want, you can come to that Eventbrite lecture. And today we're going to see the practical application of the orders. So last week we saw the origin of the orders, an introduction, how to use them, which books are the best to draw them. Today we're going to see some practical examples of how you can use the orders. And then, as you can see, we have another every 2 weeks we meet, and then we have different topics. So next week is the only one in which we're going to draw a little bit, which are going to be having fun with the cantus leaf. And then from there onwards, we're going to see floor plans, elevations, floor patterns and ceiling, staircases, bathrooms and kitchens, Gothic with K, and then classical landscaping. The whole purpose of this is once you have finished all this program, our idea is that all of you will spend the summer with a project, designing a project on your own. And in September, we come back and we work together on it. So that's the idea. Is you have the tools, you have the resources to design, and then it can be project, a real project. It can be an imaginary project. And then we will decide. We are trying to see if we can make an exhibition, but that's not set in stone. But we would like to do like a collective exhibition with all the work of all the people who have been coming, assuming that obviously the group, as a group, as an individuals, we're going to reach a good level of quality. That's why we will be here pushing you and giving you tips how to create those drawings. I mean, as I said, you can we'll see in time when we approach to the end of this session of this season. Sorry, and we will see if you want to do. Okay, I want to do a house. I want to do a counter proposal. And so I am thinking myself on doing a counter proposal for a building. We have other colleagues who were already doing their counter proposals that are going to be invited to do them. A very talented Norwegian students of architecture, Carl Frederick Hofstein, that you will see probably very soon on press, etc. And he's doing an amazing counter proposal for a museum in Oslo. So all that is things that you can bring. I mean, I know that some of you have already presented counter proposals for other projects. We want to organize one for the Beauty and Ugliness conference in Oslo. So all that is things to come. But as I was saying, today we're going to talk about applications of the order, practical applications of the orders. I would say that the first element that you need to bear in mind is the alignment. That's the first and most important practical application of the order. The neck, which the neck of the column, which is the upper diameter of the column, marks the alignment with the entablature above. All the elements above the column need to be aligned with the upper diameter. That's a must in classical architecture. It happens in Gothic. It happens in every type of architecture. The neck, which is the diameter just below the capital, is the element that is sustaining most of the weight, which is transmitting the weight to the ground, and therefore everything needs to be aligned with it. There is only one notable exception in which you can skip this idea, and we're going to see it. So on that regard, you can very clearly see two examples of moldings of two different porticos, and you can clearly see that the one in the right has been nicely done, aligned with everything that needs to be aligned, while the one to the left has something odd. And if you don't see anything odd on it, now I am telling you that this is not the way you do things in classical architecture. This is not the way you do things in traditional architecture by extension either. So this is not a matter of my preference or a Western preference or the classic, or that's what the classical say, the Gothic do something else. No. All the loads are transmitted to the pillar, and then if necessary, we have cantilever elements, we have brackets, we have things, but the slab doesn't project outside the lines of the upper necks. And you can see very clearly that while the structure on the right looks like light, despite being bigger, despite being a much bigger entablature, the structure on the left looks heavy and clumsy. And this is because of the wrong placement of the entablature. Together with that comes the position of the pediment itself. So it's not only the entablature, the pediment needs to be well aligned. And I will, last week we saw some of the rules, and we can repeat them later on with the books that you may, that you should check for all these. The main one is the American Vignola, which, as I have said many times, is probably not the best book, but it has become the standard in teaching classical architecture because it's the one that the ICIA uses and that Notre Dame uses. It's a good book. There are others that are good as well. And at the end of the day, with classical architecture, you cannot stick with a single source. So I would say the American Vignola is your good source to start with. And then later on, we move to something else, to the proper Vignola, which would be your next source, or to others. Here you can see the only exception in which the entablature doesn't have to be aligned with the neck of the column, and it's the case of the Greek Doric order. And why is this? Why are the Greek specials? It's not that it's special or not special, it's because of the special distribution of the triglyph in the Greek Doric. We know that in the Roman Doric, and we're going to see a slide in a moment, the triglyph, which is this rectangle with these groups, is centered with the axis of the column. In the Greek orders, the triglyph is put in the corner of the frieze. We know as well that the sequence between triglyphs and metopes means that the metope has to be a square. And you can see here in a bit more detail what I'm talking about. We need to have metopes, which is the space in between the triglyphs. They have to be squared, and by that we are creating a rhythm, we are creating a sequence. Once you translate the sequence into the separation of the columns, we might start to have some problems, especially if you want to have the triglyph on the corner. And why do Greeks have the triglyph on the corner? We were talking about that last week. And I recommend recommend you to go back to the video. I think it's published already on YouTube. If not, you will get access to the server where we are storing them until we have the channel fully functioning. And the reason why the Greeks put the triglyph in the corner is because that's what you normally put the rafter if you're building a timber building. And we know as well that the Doric order is derived directly from timber structure. So that creates a sequence in the Doric order that is more powerful than any other element. You may have heard, and we are going to talk in a moment, about the intercolumniation and what are the different names of the intercolumniation. So that way, if you in the Greek order, we have several issues when positioning the metope on the corner that are solved in different ways. So you can have either wider wider metopes on one side, wider metopes on two sides, a narrower column space in the corner, or a wider triglyph. Ideally, you shouldn't have any of them, and you should make your composition in such a way that the columns are all the columns inside the portico are aligned with the triglyphs above. That's not going to comply with any of the rules of separation between columns, but that's the key or the magic, if you want to say so, of the Doric order. And as example, I mean, I like bringing contemporary examples of the Doric order. This is the Maitland Robinson Library in Cambridge. This was done at the beginning of 20th century, like 20 years ago, by architect Quinlan Terry. And you can very clearly see what I'm talking about, the triglyph not to be, the entablature being displaced. But even in this case, it doesn't go beyond the abacus of the column. Now, this is something that only happens in the Greek Doric. Doesn't happen in the Greek, Ionic, Corinthian, any of the Hellenistic orders, or the Composite, or the Tuscan, or any other order. So please bear this in mind, that this situation only happens in the Greek Doric. And as a reminder, here is the difference between the Greek Doric and the Roman Doric. You can very clearly see that the Greek Doric has its triglyphs in the corner, while the Roman Doric has the triglyph aligned perfectly with the axis of the column. So that's a very key important point that you need to bear in mind when doing the orders. I'm seeing everyone is, yeah, please, when you enter, please mute yourself, otherwise I will mute you. So that's a bit the idea. And here it's a bit, you may have heard about the columnation. We're going to see a little bit more. And this is what happens when you have your triglyphs. You may get like odd dimensions, like here it's 2 and a quarter of the diameter, 5 diameters and 1/4, which are things that normally don't happen in the other orders, but in the Doric order, the intercolumniation is defined by the triglyph. If you don't want your intercolumniation defined by the triglyph, don't use triglyphs. Use Tuscan or use Ionic, or use a Doric without triglyph, which I would never recommend. So go for a Tuscan. Now, the triglyph has always to be, the triglyph and the column have to be aligned. You cannot have a column below a metope. The column always sits, the triglyph always sits on a column, but no column sits on a metope. If it sits on the metope, it is badly designed, or there has been a problem on the alignment and situation, positioning of the elements. This is a reminder for all of you, if you don't know, if you have never heard about this, the different intercolumniation for the orders. This is defined by Vitruvius. You have the pycnostyle, which is 1 diameter and a half. You have the systyle, which is 2 diameters. You have the diastyle, which is 3 diameters. The aerostyle, which is 4 diameters. And then you have something in between, a bit more balanced, which is the eustyle, which means that you have 3 diameters in the centers and 2 diameters and a quarter on the side columns. From there, you can have different distribution, different positioning. They don't have to match the they don't have to match the Vitruvian canon, but you need to ensure that at least that if it's either you have your column, your portico, all the columns evenly positioned, or the opening in the center is wider than the openings on the side. Now, if you tell me that you have 3 and 2, that's still okay. Sorry, I have unmuted the people who are coming. Sorry, Bruno, but if you want to comment something, as soon as you just unmute yourself and you say something, that will be great. Next, we're going to talk about the Ionic order, and you can very clearly see that this is a Greek Ionic order. This is a building in the United States. I think is the National Treasury in Washington, and you can tell me, oh, why do you know it's Greek order? Well, the first thing is that it's literally an emulation, a copy of the Ionic order in the Erecteion in Greece. And in general, I don't know what the Erecteion is. I don't know what you're talking about, Pablo. Tell me more. And I would say that the main difference, we're going to see some Ionic capitals in a moment. The main difference of the two orders is that the volute in the Ionic order does this gentle curve, which is called the cushion, while in the Roman Ionic you don't have it. Now, other thing that we have in the Ionic order, or starts appearing in the Ionic order, that we didn't realize much in the Doric, is the antae. You may know what a pilaster is. The pilaster is the projection of the column onto the wall. And if you have a Doric column, that's very easy. You just project the column. But with the Ionic, because the volute is difficult to carve, it's got a lot of complexities, and we're going to see what happens when you are moving in three dimensions. The Greeks just created the antae. The antae is not anymore. It's just the projection of the Ionic capital onto the wall, eliminating the volutes. You can very clearly see the correspondence between the moldings in one and another. There are several variations because the Greek orders have much more balance of creativity than the Hellenistic and the Roman ones. When they say Greek orders, I mean the classical Greek orders, the classical of Pericles, and the stage of classical Greece, as opposed to the Roman orders, which are basically Hellenistic orders, which is the architecture that comes after Alexander. So why is that architecture different? Because the architecture of the Greek orders or the properly classical Greeks is very limited to the Greek world, to the Greek peninsula and to the limits of the Greek colonies. Also very ethnic. The Ionic is for the Ionians, the Doric is for the Dorians, the Corinthian is for Corinth. While once Alexander expands the whole empire, everyone benefits from the Greek orders, and they stop becoming an ethnical Greek thing to represent something else that the Romans will take. We were talking about that in our last episode or last class or last session. You can very clearly see, I mean, that in here that the antae is projecting and creates that. This is the maximum, talking about the distance between columns. This is almost the maximum you could stretch an order without making it look odd. Obviously, this is a modern construction. This is a bill in Kazakhstan, which is finalized in 2018, and you can clearly see that we have bigger spans, but obviously because we have different techniques. The span of the columns was such because in the Greek orders or in the ancient times, Greek architecture is an architecture due in posts and beams. So that means that the width of the beam is the width of a single piece of a stone. That creates problems, structural problems, if you go very big, because the stone can break. That's why things keep progressing, and then even in Renaissance and 19th century, before the advent of metal, we can start getting bigger spans, and we will talk about them later on. Especially when we start reviewing your exercises, we'll be talking about bigger spans. But as you can see in here, all our columns, they are parallel to the wall, perfectly parallel. You can see in the distance what the architect did here is that they used the anti, and then they took the anti around the building to tie the corners. And then you can see in the distance there is another portico in perpendicular. But that portico doesn't interact with the main portico. They're very happy, everyone looking at one side and not worrying about each other. What happens if we have more columns in the portico? Because the Doric order is an order, correct. The Villa Rotonda has Greek, the Villa Rotonda has Roman Ionic order. The Greek order with the cushion and the elaborated volute only starts to appear in second half of 18th century in England, especially, which is when Stuart and Reeves published the Antiquity of Athens, and then all of a sudden all the Georgians have a new capital. We're going to see the Scamozzi capital, and then the two capitals that people had in the Renaissance were variants of the Roman Ionic or variants of the Scamozzi Ionic. And then all of a sudden, they brought the Greek Ionic, which has the gentle cushion, which is very, very nice to carve and to see, while the Roman Ionic is a bit more straight and severe. So what happens when we have more than one column stack? I keep saying chat, but I don't see anyone in the chat. So what happens when we have the columns are stacked and parallel? We saw in the previous image, the two columns were in two different planes. But in here, we have a row of columns creating a portico, long portico inside to enter into this little temple. And as you can see, all the columns are parallel to the wall. But unlike the Doric and the Corinthian, which are like 360 degrees around, the Doric is like a revolution element. So you just have a profile and then you rotate 360. The Corinthian is similar, not exactly similar, but very close to have a 360 view. The Ionic order is a bidimensional element. It has a front and it has a side, very clearly differentiated. And what happens? Obviously, we know that the volutes must face the facade. And in here, we have volute facing the facade, and the scrolls goes to the side. In here, we have the volute, the scrolls on the side, where they should be a sort of frontal thing, and then we have a volute just hidden in the shades. And then at the bottom, we have, further back, we have the ante, which is Ionic pilaster, which looks very clumsy. There was a problem that the architects found in the Renaissance, and they didn't know very well how to solve. You could, and the Romans found two ways of solving the issue. One was, as you can see here, rotating the columns, and then having the volute in the corner rotate in such a way that once you look in front, you see, for example, on the right hand side volute, you can almost see, you may think that the volute is parallel to the wall, but it's actually rotated 45 degrees. Only when you just confront the volute is when you see what's happening. So this is the solution that they took in most of the classical buildings, and you are going to see here the temple of Portunus in Rome, also known as the temple of the Fortuna Virile, and in many ancient engravings called Santa Maria Egyptiaca, because that was the church that was there in that temple. So this is a very small temple, very, very nice, that it's showing us how the Romans understood the Ionic order. It has been heavily restored, as you can see, but we can still see some of the elements. I think that you can see a little bit how the volute here is rotated, and in here you can feel that it isn't. But if you see, the scrolls have rotated on the side. So that's the important thing, that we are combining two planes. You can also see here how it has been done. I think that here you can see much better how the volute just merges on the corner. So this is something that when you are designing a ionic portico, you need to bear this in mind, that there is going to be an intersection between two planes, and while there are several ways of solving it, none of them is fully perfect. This is basically what it happens in plan on the Temple of Portunus. We have a volute which is parallel to the wall behind, and then another volute that is 45 degrees. And only when you see them in very detail is when you realize that it's slightly skewed, but not always. But not always, not from every single point of view. It looks skewed. In most of the points of view, it looks parallel. So, which is this visual trick is what solves the problem of the ionic volute in a corner. However, on the inside, you find this. And some architects also tried to rotate the volute at 45 degrees, but it doesn't look so nice on the inside than in the outside. Why? Because in the outside you are combining two planes of volutes, while in the inside you are combining two planes of scrolls. So the only way of making it work is by putting the scrolls at 45 degrees. This is a very clumsy detail, but it happens anyway, and it's the only geometrical way of having everything at the same time. It happens in the rectangle, which means that this is a problem that they faced very early in antiquity, and that was the only way they found to solve it. You can as well see here in the rectangle, obviously the photograph is taken in the corner, and you can very clearly see that the volute in the corner, but if you look at the other one on the other side, it almost looks parallel. So it's a very, very good visual trick to work. And you can also see here how the volute is working in the corner. Unfortunately, this comes again from the Antiquities of Athens, which is the one that make the Greek Ionic look fashionable, especially in England and later on in the rest of Europe. But you can see very clearly that the volute has a sort of elegant fitting, and then both of them are connected, and with the nice carve of the cushion, it looks very, very nice. Before we move, let's see the question. Is there a record of the first session? Yes, there is a record of the first session. Some fragments have been published on social media, on Escuela de Arquitectura Clásica account, and I believe that they has been now uploaded to YouTube. But what we are doing before we have the YouTube channel fully functioning is that we are giving you access to the server, access to the server folder where we have the recordings. Obviously, you can download, but you cannot delete them, so that you can take a look at them. What we don't share is the presentations. The presentations remain with us, but we will recommend books where you can get the whichever element you want. That's what we have the second part to discuss and comment books and everything. So what happens if you say, look, what these Greeks did was very clumsy. I think that this is horrible. I'm leaving right now because I'm not finding what I want. Okay, so then I would say, don't worry, I have something else for you. And that something else is the Ionic capital with 4 faces, also called Scamozzi capital. But it's called Scamozzi capital because Vincenzo Scamozzi is the one that popularized it and who created a proper order with its proportions and the way it is drawn. But the order existed before that. One of the earliest examples that we can find is the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum, where you can see perfectly that this column, that these capitals have 4 volutes, Roman volutes. You can very clearly see the difference. They have become a bit more severe than the Greek ones. All of a sudden, they don't have the gentle cushion. They look shorter. They look a bit more, but they look a bit more serious than the gentle and fancy Greek. Here you can see as well in the corner how each volute is rotated at 45 degrees, and then they just connect with each other. This is something that Vitruvius doesn't talk about it. Vitruvius only talks you about putting the one volute at 45 degrees. So when in the Renaissance they started to look at all these buildings, they were saying, okay, I have this building which is very beautiful, has all the proportions of the Ionic order that Vitruvius tells me about, but hey, the volutes are in a different way. And then they would say, okay, what happens here? This is the Bath of Diocletian, which were converted into a church in the 16th century by Michelangelo, Santa Maria degli Angeli. But everything that you see here, all these elements, they are Roman original. They were just left there and reused. Why are they so well kept? Because the baths of Diocletian were still covered in the Renaissance, or the portion where the church was built, which was one of the pools, was still covered, was in very good condition, hadn't been sacked. So that was one of the reasons why it was kept. But when I mean sacked, I mean that the capitals were not removed, most of the marbles were still there, and then it could be reused very quickly and easily as a church, as part of all the embellishment policies of Rome in the late 16th century. And again, in here, they found something that they didn't know what to do with this. And this something is the composite capital. The composite capital is a combination of Corinthian and Ionic. And as you can see in the right hand side, we have a proper Corinthian, and that Corinthian has like a couple of volutes, little volutes that go on the sides, and then that repeat on the four corners. What they did in the composite is like they beef up the little volutes, the caulicles, as they are called in classical architecture, and they convert it into proper volutes of the Ionic order, taking into inspiration the temple of Saturn. Then this creates something that when they start taking a look at it in the classical antiquity, or better said in the Renaissance, they don't know where this comes from, because Vitruvius doesn't talk about it. And Vitruvius doesn't talk about it because this capital wouldn't appear until almost a century after his death. There are similar things, but probably he didn't know about them, because what we know when we read Vitruvius is that he was following, I'm not going to say archaic forms, but he was following older books. One of the ones he mentioned is Hermogenes of Alexandria. So he was using ancient sources, and Vitruvian architecture is very conservative compared with what was being done in the rest of the Mediterranean world at the time, which is why it was perfect for the policies of Augustus, who wanted calm and measure. When Nero comes and makes a mess out of everything, and then the Flavians come and need to put a bit of order into that chaos, they have a lot of Neronian fanciness to keep reusing, and one of them would be the composite capital. 1,000 years later, Vincenzo Scamozzi, which we can consider as the last of the big strategists of the Renaissance. We could say that the first one is Alberti, and we have a line during 14th and 15th century where a lot of people would write about classical architecture. We will have Alberti. We had later on we had Cesariano when he wrote about Vitruvius. We had Barbaro. We had in Spanish we had Diego de Sagredo. We had Juan Bautista de Villalpando. We had Guillaume Filandrier, Philippe Leorme, Daniele Barbaro when he translated Vitruvius, Palladio himself, and many others. There is a very interesting one from Giovanni Antonio Rusconi, very interesting, and many others in the way. A lot of articles, treatises were published in 16th century, translating Vitruvius, reinterpreting Vitruvius in their own, and the most famous one that we have till in nowadays are Serlio, Palladio, Vignola, and many others. And in that spirit of writing a treatise that could justify and explain classical architecture in a way that is understandable and exportable to everyone, the treatise of Vincenzo Scamozzi, idea of an universal architecture, idea de una architectura universale, is the last one in that big cycle of 200 years. People will write treatises after him, yes, but they won't have the universal or the general tone that all these old treatises had. They will start being focused on a specific elements, or they would be simply remixes of the older treatises. We will have to wait much until late 18th century to start seeing different treatises which have a philosophical idea, a different philosophical approach to architecture. For example, they say on architecture by Logier, or the difficult to classify book of Leduc's about architecture. But in that line, Scamozzi is the last one in having all this harmonious idea of the Renaissance and this harmonious idea of keeping an universal architecture. And in that sense, to solve the problem with the Ionic order, he just presents this capital. He just measures all the similar capitals that exist from antiquity, and from them he extracts an average, which is exactly what Vignola did. So he's not doing anything new, anything strange. He's doing exactly what Vignola did. He measures the building, he just extracts which are all the common elements and the common proportions, and from there he redesigns the order in such a way that fits a whole scheme. And this is important for all of you to understand. The orders are not fixed elements. Some people, I mean, I was doing one of free lectures on introduction to classical architecture a couple of weeks ago, and one lady was saying, oh, but the orders are so inflexible, I cannot do anything. And I say, no, madam, the orders are flexible as far as you allow them to be flexible. You need to, as Luthians used to say, you need to make the orders yours. You cannot copy. If you copy, you are lost. You need to copy them and make them yours. And why do you need to make them yours? That doesn't mean that you need to create a new order. That means that you need to adapt the orders and the proportions of the order to the specific needs of your site, of your design. One good example of how you need to adapt an order nowadays. Nowadays, all the stone is done by all the stone wall flat moldings are done by machine, and the machines have tolerances, and we tend to build much smaller than in the past. So when you want to have a column that it's not very tall, you want to do it for domestic or for a small portico, and you want it detailed, you are going to have to deal with some tolerances that less than that your craft person, your engineer, your contractor isn't going to be able to deal with. So this is very important. These minimal tolerances is about 5 mil for sandstone, can be a little bit less for limestone and marbles, and has to be a little bit more for granite. So this is the first element that is going to be guiding the whole percentage or the whole proportions of your order that you need to bear in mind when we're talking about realistic projects. And coming back to the Scamozzi capital, as you can very clearly see, this solves the problem in a very nice way of in what direction does the volute look like. Does it look to the front? Does it look to the side? Doesn't matter. With Scamozzi, the volute looks at the 4 directions and looks everywhere. Therefore, it's not looking to anywhere, and solve magistrally the problem. And one thing that you can see here, I'm bringing this image because many people might consider this, oh, this is so classical, so beautiful, I love it. Why don't we build like this? I wish we don't build like this anymore. This has all the mistakes that you can imagine. And this is what where the modernists come and attack classical architecture. This is what you should never do. And what elements do we have wrong in this image? We have several of them. The first one that you can very clearly see is the entablature not aligned with the neck of the column. Second one that you can see is that the columns, those columns are Corinthians, and they are too short for the height of the capital. The capital is much bigger than the column. Next, the entablature is massive and doesn't have any logical sequence of moldings. It's just some moldings stacked one on top of the other, and some caritative soul that at the end of the day decided to put some massive denticles on top. And then we have the little pedestal with the balustrades that are almost okay, but they still have their own set of problems. So this is what you shouldn't do. This is what you need to be aware when you are composing or you are designing. You might feel tempted to download 10 million blocks from AutoCAD and start putting them together thinking that you are being Michelangelo. No, please. Don't be Michelangelo. Be Bramante. Be Palladio. Be Schinkel. Be Alberti. Be Brunelleschi. but don't be Michelangelo. There can only be one Michelangelo. You can be yourself, but don't try to break the rules the way Michelangelo was breaking them, especially if you don't know the rules. Michelangelo could do whatever he wanted. Bernini could do whatever he wanted. Borromini could do whatever he wanted because they knew the rules. If you don't know the rules, you are just making a fool of yourself. So that's the difference. That's why San Carlo delle Quattro Fontane and la Sacrestia Vecchia in Florence, the masterwork and the drawing in AutoCAD that you have just done by smashing all the orders together, you are being attacked on social media by all the modernists. So you have to bear in mind that it's not enough with just will to do. You need to do it right. And I'm going to be harsh. If you cannot do it right, don't do it. Now the good thing is that you can learn how to do it, and that's why I assume that you are here wanting to learn a little bit more on how to do it and which sources you're going to look like. But at the same time, the important thing here, if you have taken a look at what we have talked, is proportion. Everything here is out of proportion, and proportion is a very important part of architecture, and we're going to talk a little bit about proportions in classical architecture. To talk about that, I'm going to use as a guidance my colleague Nir Buras had his book, The Art of Classic Planning, which I know that all of you or many of you have read. And if you haven't read, I recommend you to take a look at it and read it. It has a lot of very interesting information, not only about architecture, but also about planning, which is very, very good. He said that there are several types of proportion, and they must all be present in any design for the most rudimentary experience of beauty. What Dr. Buras is saying here is that the experience of beauty is guided and by your brain, and the way your brain explores beauty is through the neuroscience. And this is something, this is, some people will debate about this and other people not, but it's the concept that our brains can perceive geometric forms even if we don't know about them. We can perceive simple numeric proportions. Some people say that we can't, and therefore proportions don't exist, but the proportion still exists. And I always put the example: if you show a baby a square, the baby doesn't need to talk, but the baby's brain will understand that the square has its both sides equal, and the area of the square is its sides multiplied. You don't need to know that for that to be true. And that's the basis when we talk about the experience of beauty. You don't need to know every single detail about the beauty of an order to know that your brain just recognizes that that's a good proportion. It's based on good numerical relationship. The Pythagoreans on that side, they would try to investigate more why there are good and why there are bad and why there are just okay numerical proportions. In the Renaissance, they would try as well with music, and they would realize that only with very simple relationships you don't get too far. You need to get more and more complex, and that's what we're going to talk about. The first grade, or the first characteristic of proportion, the first type of proportion, is equality, which is the bilateral system known in nature, but it's the one that we most normally use. Is equality. It's I would say that this is a characteristic of proportion rather than say types. It's the attributes of proportion. No, it's like when we study philosophy and we study the attributes of the beings, the attribute of the living beings in scholastic. That's what would say the equality. Some examples of equality, other than its most directive meaning, which is just equal, equal, equal. You can see an arcade where all the elements repeat in a very harmonious way, and there are parts that are related to each other. That's equality. Doesn't mean only repetition, doesn't only mean exactly equal, but also relationship between those equal parts. Now that we could say that some parts are more equal than others, but all equalities are related. The next one is differentiation. So I would call that this is more an attribute of proportion than a type of proportion. And why it's an attribute? Because it's differentiating the big from the little, the important from the less, so less important, and so on. This is a clear example of differentiation We have the big opening differentiating the little opening, the panel differentiating the painted area, and so on and so on. Now, where do you put the point on the differentiation? We are going to see. You get it with numerical relationships, or if you want to go more contemporary ways of doing it, you can obtain it with the golden ratio, which a lot of people like doing. But as we're going to talk a little bit today, the golden ratio is not a classical way of proportioning. The golden ratio is something, it's a wonderful number, but it was not used in antiquity. Third type of proportion is punctuation. So punctuation is the end of the sentence, where you're putting the final dot, the final coda to your design. And that way, the capital is the punctuation of the column, the cornice is the punctuation of the entablature, and so on and so on. And the date is the punctuation of the pedestal, and each of them are punctuating over each other. So that's one other of the attributes of proportion is punctuation. You can very clearly see there is also a relationship between punctuation and differentiation, because obviously they both of them go together. The punctuation is the transitioning point into the two different elements. So if we're differentiating capital column from entablature, my punctuation will be in the capital, but the differentiation is still there. And you can see the three of them together. They are, rather than types, they're attributes of the proportion. And here you see in a bigger way with everything related one to each other in a diagram done by Richard Sammons, who talks a lot about it. If you can go to his lectures on YouTube or any of his books, he will talk extensively about punctuation and differentiation. So it's very, very interesting in relationship with the different parts of the geometry. There is another one which is called the regional style. Regional style is a proportion of specific culture or context. So this can be in a narrow sense or in a wider sense. So we have, let's say, non-Western cultures who don't use classical architecture, those still use regional style. So, for example, it was not so long ago I was on a round table discussing with other Mexican architects about traditional architecture, and we started talking a little bit about Serlio and how you find a lot of proportions from Serlio in Mexico. That is why the traditions from Serlio were literally flowing to the New Spain. But then we were also talking about how do we understand the proportions from the Aztecs, the proportion from the Mayans, because we don't know. And the only way of knowing it is by doing the same thing that people in the Renaissance did. You measure the building and you find a relationship. But that relationship isn't going to be sacred geometry, isn't going to be the golden ratio, it's going to be a number. Entire number that is going to be related with something related to its mythology. As simple as that. And then you have personal style, which is the proportion specific to a very specific architect. And that's why you have for example, we have just seen the Scamozzi capital. Why? This is a proportion related to Scamozzi. And that's why you say the Doric order of Palladi, the Doric order of Vignolo, the Doric order of Scamozzi, etc., etc. And to explain that, I like bringing this example where you can see, in this case, the totally different amount of ionic orders that you can find. And how in Vitruvius the ionic order is 9 times its diameter, but in Celio is 8 times. The ionic order from Celio looks much squat than the others. But we have other orders that are even different. I mean, I am bringing here all the ones that you can see in the treatises, but the tallest ionic order that you can find is the ionic order of the Temple of Apollo in, where was it? In Didyma, which is almost 11 times its diameter. So it's higher than a composite. It looks like a giraffe when you see it. Looks a bit like it having a stretch in AutoCAD, but it works and it looks nicely and proportioned the same way that the giraffe neck looks very proportioned. All the proportions that we have seen, once applied in practical terms, they can be divided into arithmetic proportions or geometric proportions. There are other proportions that are purely mathematical, and other proportions we're going to see that are, I'm calling them modern proportions. So arithmetic proportion is the classical way of building an order. You see these schemes a lot. So we're talking about the relationship between the diameters, and everything is related to the diameter, always seeing numeric relationships. That's an arithmetic proportion. We are talking about numbers and sequence of numbers. As opposed to that, the geometric proportions are the result of geometrical figures, of tracing a figure on the ground. And why is this important? It is important because in many cases, the graphic techniques of antiquity were not very good. You had yeah, we say, oh, they had parchment, they had papyrus. Yes, they had, but what had been preserved to us were the finest parchments, the finest papyrus. So that means that a lot of stuff was done in much, much less quality paper, where details were difficult to draw. So, and also we need to remember that the concept of the numbers don't appear until the Renaissance in Western Europe. The numbers as we know now, they were invented in India, then the Arabs took them, and then from the Arabs came to the Christians, and they don't become widespread until the beginning of 16th century. Before that, in the West, to express numerical relationship, you had to use Roman numerals or just write in text the number. Alberti, for example, when he writes the Re Edificatoria, he says very clearly that he doesn't want any copies, because when he wrote, the printing press wasn't widespread at all. He said any copies must copy the number as I write it, not the number as you would use it with ciphers, because he was scared that people would forget the ciphers. The same way that people forget the Roman numerals, and then all of a sudden you have mistakes in the numbers. And one of the most classical examples of geometric proportion is the Vitruvian Man. Obviously, you all have in your minds the Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, and some people think that that's the only Vitruvian Man that existed. Well, I mean, Leonardo, first of all, Leonardo was drafting what Vitruvius said about the proportions of a man. And what Vitruvius says about the proportion of a man is that a man which is standing still with his arm extended, the perimeter of the figure he's tracing is a square, or the perfect man would give you a square. That same perfect man, if he extends his arms at 45 degrees and his legs at 45 degrees, still gets a square that can be inscribed into a circle. Like all squares can be inscribed into circles. What's the beauty or the relevance of the Vitruvian Man? Is that Leonardo does both of them in a single drawing, and it becomes a famous drawing because it was from Leonardo. But these drawings were very common in antiquity and in the Renaissance. So in this regard, Leonardo didn't do anything strange. Leonardo here was doing what everyone else was doing, was trying to understand the perfect proportions of a man. He didn't invent the wheel, he didn't invent anything, he wasn't making any conspiracy with the Merovingians, or you name, or Tartaria, or whichever, choose your favorite conspiracy theory, or aliens. No, he was just, he was probably read Vitruvius, and as a curious person, as an artist as he was saying, oh, I need to try this, I need to check if this is right. But the importance of this geometrical conception relies also in that it would be used for other purposes. For example, this is the treatise of Francesco de Giorgio Martini. This was never published. It was a manuscript that was circulating around North Italy. And in here, he shows the ideal proportions of the church compared with the proportions of a man. And you can clearly see that the height of this person is almost the height of the central nave, and the extension of his arms at almost 30 degrees, or in this case 22.5 degrees, which is the inclination of the classical pediment, is giving you the height of the other. So this was a way of engaging the proportion of the human being into the proportion of architecture, which is something that we have forgotten many times, in the symbolic way of doing this. We have engaged a lot into Neufert and the Modulord, etc. And we have all the elements that we know for this is the extension that you need to have in order to get the toilet roll. This is the depth when you're cooking. This is the depth that you're having a buffet kitchen for the cooker to serve you the food. You cannot be more than this, more than that. But the human being applied to architecture was also meaning this, a much higher purpose than telling you the distance to get the toilet roll. Many of you might have seen this image, which is the section of the Cathedral of Milan. This is from Vitruvius, the translation of Vitruvius by Cesare Cesariano in the 1520s. And this translation specifically is very relevant, very important, because Cesariano is talking here about Gothic architecture. And he's talking about proportions. He talks in a couple of pages before this page, he's talking about the Vitruvian man. And then in his comments, he's also talking about how to do the proportions for a Gothic cathedral, which in this case is the Cathedral of Milan. These are the proportions that Serlio lists. So when Serlio is talking about geometrical proportions, he's talking about the perfect square, the proportions sesquiquarta, proportions sesquitertia, the proportion diagonal, the proportions sesquialtera, the superbipatiens tertia, and the double square. Does any of you see here the golden ratio? Good, because there is no golden ratio. Nobody in the Renaissance could see that the golden ratio could have a practical application. Luca Pacioli has published the Divina Proporzione, where he talks extensively about that, around 50 years before Serlio publishes his first book. But nobody, Serlio, in no point Serlio talks about the golden ratio, about phi, about anything like that. It was Luca Pacioli who would talk it. Some mathematicians would talk about it, would continue the translation of Euclid, but none of them would use them as architecture. They would go to geometrical relationship, as you can see in the image to the right, and it is true that once you start applying all those geometrical relationship, you start getting some interesting points. Of course, I mean, if you start tracing lines one to the other, at some point they will intersect one with each other. And also, if we're using relationships that are based on two axes, on dimensions that are repeating on the two axes, and we put them in a controlled environment, they will give you results like this. Why? Because everything is aligned. When we're talking about entire numbers and perfect proportions, they can be bigger and bigger. So that's why I'm bringing here the point of Serlio, and then another one with the tetrastyle portico, how everything is engaged. If you design the tetrastyle portico in a way that it's almost systile, you get that. So these are the importance of this is the key point. And why is also important? Because for craftspeople, it might be easier to do the geometrical way than the arithmetic way. Why? Because you only need to remember what is one of the intersections, where in the arithmetic way, you need to do a lot more of numbers and operations. You can see here a very beautiful example of what would say equality of the attributes of proportion, and also the relationship. I mean, it's very, very simple, or it can be very complex. You may have seen this drawing a lot, and we're going to see the alternative version of this drawing. And I'm bringing this specific one because this was a geometrical analysis done of Santa Maria di Fiore in Florence in the 1970s by Franco Borsi, who was a modernist architect. So we're not talking here about any person who can be claimed as not knowing. He knew what he was doing. He knew, because this is something that you know a lot, and you always remember the modernists know a lot about historical architecture. Don't underestimate them on that sense. They know a lot. They know more than you. They know more than me, because you need to know your enemy, and they know the enemy very well. So never engage on a historical debate with a modernist, because it's going to tell you, don't tell me about history, because I did a PhD about Alberti. I did a PhD about Vitruvio. You're not going to tell me anything I don't know. And I tell you that Vitruvius is useless because I have studied it a lot. And they use the argument of authority. So sometimes you cannot argue with them using those arguments. When we need to go, some people go through the more empiric or empiricist scientific approach with the neuroscience, or let's go for more the symbolic approach. You decide the one you want to go. You will always find criticism. So it doesn't matter. You just do what you want. You do what you believe is beautiful. You do, and if you believe that it's beautiful, you do it following the rules that will tell you that it's beautiful. But don't engage in wars. You cannot lose. Choose your battles. So coming back to this, we're going to see at the end of the presentation another interpretation of this facade. You can see here is this. I like this drawing because it's a combination of arithmetic and geometric proportions. You can see very clearly how the whole structure of the facade is done on mathematical operations. But if you took a look to the left, to proportion the columns, to proportion the individual elements, we need to go to arithmetic proportion. So this is the beauty and the interest of this proportion. If Alberti didn't do this to design the facade, he did something very similar to get onto it. But definitely we know that he didn't do the golden ratio. This is similar one to determine the points of the Parthenon of the Pantheon. This is by Blondel from his courses on architecture at the beginning of 18th century, and you can see here how he determined certain points. He wanted to have the first element for the Pantheon is that the dome is half a sphere, and the whole thing can be the whole sphere can be inscribed into the space, and from there he takes some, let's say, design decisions that are guided by this by geometry. So this is a good way of structuring things. Le Corbusier would call this tracé régulateur, and he would make them a feature of modern architecture. Well, in reality, they had been used for forever. Le Corbusier was criticism because he didn't like the numeric relationship of the orders, being the special person that he was. He hated what he didn't have things that he didn't like. He had things that he liked and things that he hated. And he hated classical architecture because he couldn't understand it. That's basically the reason. We can talk a lot about why he didn't understand it, and there were several reasons. There are several studies around that explain why he didn't understand classical architecture and why he didn't like he detested classical architecture. There is one component coming from the romantic neo-Gothic medievalist environment, but other that is like more intricate and related to his own mind. A good book about proportion is Beauty, Memory, and Unity by Steve Bass, which I know that many of you have already read. And I would recommend you to take a look at it. It's very good. It's a very, very beautiful book about proportion. Now we're going to talk about other proportion, those other proportions. And these ones, you see them a lot, and some people love them, but they seem to be like ancestral and have been used everywhere, and all of them come from the beginning of 20th century. So the first one is the dynamic symmetry. You find this a lot. This is when you start. This is an exaggeration of the geometrical proportions. The dynamic symmetry sees that instead of having simple geometrical relationship, everything is related with square roots of one or the other, and by diagonals that then create square roots. And this was proposed by this gentleman, J. Hambridge, in the United States, who was then joined by another Norwegian who made more noise, and then he was joined by another Romanian politician with a lot of time to spend in London. So, and then obviously Le Corbusier saw all these guys and he saw the heavens open, because then he found that his architecture, he knew very well that this architecture wasn't related to what he was doing, but he made his architecture work according to the theories of these guys and not with the classical. That's why his architecture, he was seeing it as superior and as a symbol of the times. He published lots of books. He published a magazine called The Diagonal. They are available at archive.org if you want to read them. It's very interesting. He started studying the proportion of the Greek basis, and then from there he came to conclusions. And everything was coming from the obsession of realizing that no curve was a simple curve. No element was a simple element. The curves were very complex, and he was coming from this obsession of understanding the exact parable that was traced on the Greek base. Well, the truth is that the Greek bases were done by hand, following a similar model, and done in a rudimentary way, which was the potter's person machine. So small discrepancies could be expected. We were not talking about a fully standardized product, but probably with a very American mindset that everything was starting to be standardized. He didn't understand that the bases could look the same, but they were not standardized. One of the things that were characteristic of 19th century. Many people refused to understand the diversity of architecture, the diversity of tradition, and they wanted to fit it into standardized elements, and whatever wasn't fitting was discarded. Again, that's the mindset in which Le Corbusier generates his theories. The second person is this angry Norwegian gentleman called Frederick Mako de Lund, who wrote a book looks like very serious. It's called Ad Quadratum, a study of the geometrical basis of classic medieval religious architecture. So what he's saying here is that he came to a similar conclusion than Hambridge, but they didn't know about each other. He said that the relationship for the restoration for the medieval buildings was based on dynamic symmetries and the ratio of and the relationships between we're here. Oh, yes, we're all here. And relationships based on square roots. He talks a little bit about the golden ratio, but Lund still doesn't talk about the golden ratio much. He wonders if it could be used, but he has his own theory. The golden ratio was not enough for him. He wanted to have his own theory. And all this debate comes because this guy was a self-taught person, and he entered into a competition to restore the Cathedral of Trondheim in Norway, the Cathedral of Nidaros, as it was called back then. And there was several projects, because one of the problems of the Cathedral of Trondheim is that it was started being built in 14th century, continues a little bit, it stopped during the Reformation, they finish it however they can in 17th century, and then gets very deteriorated very quickly. It doesn't have enough maintenance, Nidaros stopped being the prosperous city that it was, and the whole cathedral was in very bad state at the end of 19th century, to the point in which he decided to basically dismantle and rebuild it. Don't be scandalized. A lot of buildings had that process. The Cathedral of León in Spain was completely dismantled in 18th century and then rebuilt, because they found that there was no way of stabilizing the structure than dismantling it and rebuilding it. Still with the same technique, but there was no way that the cathedral, as it was in the second half of 19th century, would stand still by this time. So they didn't. That's why I say dismantle. They didn't demolish it. They just dismantled piece by piece and then put them back, ensuring that the foundings were okay. There was another problem on top of that the cathedral was Gothic, and they put a massive classicist dome in 18th century that completely destabilized the system of weight and pulls of Gothic architecture, changed it for a different one. That's what the reason. The Cathedral of Trondheim didn't go so far, but it needed a big restoration. So among other architects, Lund made his proposal, and then he scandalized everyone. Why? First of all, because he wasn't an architect. Second, because the approach that they took in Norway, which was very interesting, they didn't want to restore the cathedral as it could have been as it was in 14th century, because they knew that there was no cathedral in 14th century. They didn't want to do a sort of what Viollet Dick would have done, which is like, I am reconstructing not as it was, but as it should have been. Because again, they don't know how it should have been, because Gothic wasn't evolved enough in Norway in 14th century. So they started to take an approach in which, okay, we're going to finalize the cathedral following the philosophy of Gothic, and as a creative exercise, we're going to respect everything that was there. We're going to use everything that is there as a precedent, but we are not going to be stuck by how it should have been done, or if in 14th century they used to do this and I don't want to do it, I don't need to do it. So that was a bit the approach that they were having. And the guy who was having this approach was Olaf Nordengen. And as you can see here, they had a lot of debates about that. So this is a sort of a caricature, very funny, in which Olaf Nordengen is sitting on top of his cathedral, building it as a sort of, he's obviously this has been done by a person who is more in favor of Lund than of Nordengen. He's shown a bit of a gargoyle dominating the cathedral, and Marco de Lung is just throwing him away his geometrical shapes. So I find quite a funny caricature, obviously considering the context, in the sense that it was like a war that they were having on creativity versus a sort of not versus geometry that was never working. And now we come to the big question, to the big element, to the big apple of the discord in architecture in nowadays, and it's this guy Mattila Gika, who created all this mess. Mattila Gika was a very clever, an intelligent Romanian diplomat who was fascinated by proportion, but he was not an architect. He was not a mathematician. He was just a dilettante who was fascinated with this. And he found in London a copy of Luca Pacioli, The Divina Proporzione. Well, he was always ambassador in London. And from there, he wrote a book, a poem, very beautiful. He was this type of high sensible people from the end of 19th century, a romantic. And he wrote a long poem about proportions. And this book, The Geometry of Art and Life. So based on Luca Pacioli, he just starts saying that there is a proportion in everything, and that proportion is the divine proportion, because the divine proportion is a very strong name. The divine proportion, the proportion of God, what the gods or what God gave to us, etc. So it's a very powerful name, and it's a very beautiful number at the same time. And then this guy, he wants to write about it, but he doesn't come alone. It's not that he invented everything. He was also following the theories of these two gentlemen, Adolf Segning and Gustav Fechner, who were mathematicians and who were researchers of the golden ratio. They were fascinated by the golden ratio. And one day, Adolf Segning, again mathematician, no relationship with architects, he was writing in a magazine with other mathematicians. They were always having mathematical riddles, and they were having fun on their own way. And one day, one of them asked, "Oh yeah, we're having a lot of fun with the golden section, but what about a practical application?" And then he says, "Oh, maybe they used it in antiquity." And then they said, his colleagues said, "There, prove it." And then he devoted his whole life to demonstrate that the golden ratio was applied in every single build that he could imagine. Obviously, when you draw the line thick enough, the golden ratio works. And he used very thick pencils. So he would demonstrate that the pyramids, whatever Mayan pyramid was found in his time, which were which were quite a few, golden ratio. The pyramids in Egypt, golden ratio. The temples of India, golden ratio. Oh, Japan has opened he opened to the world Shintoist temple, golden ratio, and so on and so on. So Fechner would try to be a bit more, to classify a bit more, to try to be a bit more systematic. Fechner was one of the guys who invented phrenology, which was this science that, depending on the diameter of your features, you could determine your characteristic, etc. You all know what happened with all these theories. I'm not going to tell you, but you know the background we are talking about, and what other people did with what these people were just messing around. So Matila Gika has read these people, finds Luca Pacioli and said, oh, this is what happened. This is the divine proportion. It's everything is there. And then Le Corbusier would read Gika, would read Seknik, would read Fechner, and then would say, this is perfect. They knew, because they had been writing from long time, that the golden ratio was not applied in antiquity. But the mathematicians were insisting that it was such an important number that it must have been there. And the problem is that with all the handle of the scientists and the archaeologists, when they started doing surveys of the Parthenon, when they started doing surveys of all the monuments, and they were demanding the golden ratio, what these people said is that we cannot demonstrate, because of all the movements across history, because of all the deformations of the structure, we cannot demonstrate if the golden ratio was applied or not. Moreover, we have discovered that, taking into consideration all the deformations and movement, the classical proportions don't comply either. This was music for someone like Le Corbusier. He hated the classical proportions. He's reading people who archaeology who have measured the building and are telling you that with the present state, you cannot confirm which were the exact proportions. And then he said, look, I'm going to do my own proportion. I'm going to do my traçeur régulateur based on the golden ratio, because it's the best number in the world. Therefore, my architecture is much better than those glorified corpses, as he called the orders, than these glorified corpses that the only thing that they are doing is rotting in the Western civilization. And that's how all this thing of the golden ratio exploded. All the modernists would use it, and it would be sold by Le Corbusier and the modernists as the new way of doing architecture, because the old ways were incapable of achieving the proportion of the golden section. They were not worth. They could be used as an historical anecdote. They could be better demolished because they don't have any interest, etc. And they could be replaced by these wonderful geometries that then later on he would convert into the modular. And from the modular, we would go for the book that all the architects know, which is Ernst Neufert, The Art of Projecting Architecture. I don't know what is the art and what is the architecture in that book, but it's a very useful book for everyone, for every architect to use. And of course, you may have heard about the sacred architecture. And sacred geometry doesn't mean the geometry, sacred geometry. You have heard about sacred geometry. Oh yes, sacred geometry, everywhere. They show you these figures and they tell you the egg of life, the fruit of life. I can't fit the Hagia Sophia has the basic pieces and the flower of life and the Metatron's cube inside. The Magians had the vector of equilibrium. So, oh God, these look like very strong words. It must be true. All this was invented by this guy, Drumbalo Melchizedek, in the 70s. In the wave of the New Age of the 1970s, this guy started to talk because he was a sort of a guru talking about Buddhism and Indian philosophy. These figures appear in the mandalas. So it's not that he took it from nowhere. These figures appear. These figures are real. They have names. They're used for religious purposes. But he expanded it and created such a mess, typical New Age syncretic mess, that once the virtual world starts, just flood it and infected the whole internet with it. With this and the golden ratio. So you need to be very careful when you see this stuff. You need to understand where it comes from. Then you can do whatever you want. But you need to understand that these things that are supposed to come from the ancient, you name them, they are not so ancient. They are the age of your parents or your grandparents or your great grandparents in the case of the golden ratio. So be aware. Use them if you want to, but don't get, because I have seen over the years a lot of people who get frustrated because, oh, I have tried to measure the minaret of the Mosque of Kairouan, which is one of the best minarets ever built in Islamic architecture, which is an emulation of the Light of Alexandria, the base for the minarets in Spain, etc., etc., etc. But it doesn't comply with the golden section. And then they very quickly make a judgment. these Arab builders that didn't know what they were doing. They were just two Habibis putting one brick on top of the other. And then they will come and say, oh, I haven't been measuring the Cathedral of Strasbourg and it doesn't comply with the golden section. These Gothic builders didn't know what they were doing. They just were two drunk men full of beer in the Middle Ages that were just putting one stone onto the other, and then it just happened. And that's a very dangerous conclusion. And that's the and then the modernists will come and say, no, no, don't listen to them. I have here all the book of account, and I can tell you how the cost of every single stone here. I'm going to make a very, 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 very long PhD, and I'm going to spend 26 hours a day talking to you about every single stone, just to bore you so that you forget about that. So those are the techniques that sometimes that followed in historiography, and in proportion you find that a lot in the internet. So be very careful when you see all this stuff. As a short note on the epilogue, Islamic architecture. What the hell happens with Islamic architecture? Islamic architecture is many people have called it the last architecture of the late antiquity. Chronologically, it's medieval, no doubt, but stylistically, it's something that especially the Western Islamic architecture that comes from the world that the Arabs conquered, which was a Byzantine world, was a late antiquity world, was a Vandal world in the case of North African, a Visigoth world in the case of Spain. They were all drinking from the same sources of classical antiquity. When they go to the east, it would be the Sassanids. It will be a different but similar system. So there is a proportion in Islamic architecture, and that proportion, and I wanted to bring in here like a combination of all the attributes. No, we have punctuation, we have differentiation, we have equality, we have all the attributes of proportion in here as well, and in such a way that can be easily achievable if you practice enough. And this proportion is explained in a wonderful book by Emilio Camps Cazorla called Módulo, Proporciones y Composición en la Arquitectura Califal Cordobesa. It's a book in Spanish, never translated into English, but very, very interesting. And as a conclusion, the golden ratio was not used in the past. Period. We cannot demonstrate that it was used in the past. We don't have any source mentioning that in the past. Historically, all the proportions in classical architecture are arithmetic and geometric. You can place as much beautiful spirals as you want in a building, and if you scale them good enough, and if you draw them with the right thickness, they will be there. But as you can see there, even if the person who did the sketch to the right was trying to justify something, none of the lines align with anything. And of course, if you start tracing lines, at some point they're going to intersect with something. But starting with, if you take a look at the sketch, the ground line is much higher than the other ground, which doesn't happen, for example, here in Alberti, where he's deliberately choosing the starting point. And then, I mean, you start putting, you see that there is no relationship between the height and the height of the pink one and the green ones. It's just a matter of putting and putting and putting them, and not because you paste them there, it's going to work. And thanks God, I mean, we especially, I mean, again, coming back to this round table, I was talking about architecture, pre-Columbian architecture in Mexico. Thanks God, in Mexico, they have realized about that, and they are fighting to their best against that. And the people who are actually measuring all those buildings, apparently they're coming to interesting conclusions. Obviously, we're not going to find that relationship between the Doric order and whatever columns was used in Uxmal. But we're going to find that the architects of Uxmal, of Palenque, of Chichen Itza, they use system of proportion. Maybe each city has its own system of proportion. That will be interesting, or maybe not. But what it is true is that proportion based on basic numerical relationship and basic geometry shapes was what guided historical architecture. So thank you very much for this part and with this we conclude the first part of the session, of the episode. You can call it however you want. And we're moving to the questions. to the question time or whatever you want to bring. I see there is a message here. It's okay, it was an old message. So now it's when you can open your microphones and
Profanus.
yes, tell me, Miss
So
Dija.
you mentioned that we didn't have golden proportions in the past, but then it's mostly a modern tool
Yes.
for architects. Something. But okay, so when I'm working with Dr. Bruce, he uses this golden proportion
You know my
so
idea that you
much.
cannot be that you have an NDA and you cannot be revealing what you talk about work, no?
Oh, no, I'm not gonna talk about work, but it's like I'm just asking that when he does it, he puts
Correct.
the
You
golden
can't, but
proportions there.
you can't do it
So,
now. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's the thing.
You
I'm
can't do it
confused
now.
about.
No, I mean there is no confusion in
How
here.
does it match now?
If you really like the golden ratio, you can use it.
No,
No,
I'm saying that I saw him putting the golden ratio on Vignola or other drawings, and now I'm like very confused that how does it match so properly there with the
it
golden ratio?
it doesn't. It
Okay,
matches because you put the
explain it.
golden ratio and then you proportion based on the golden ratio, not because it was used in the past. If you put your golden ratio, then you adapt your vignola. Remember what I was mentioning about the vignola order. Then that's how you do it. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's the way a lot of people choose to work. It's very valid way. I have had colleagues who do that at work, and obviously you
Okay.
generate, and it is a way of proportioning. I'm not saying that it is not a way of proportioning. It's saying that it
So
wasn't
you
used.
can use it to generate those proportions, but it is not the original proportions.
Correct.
Okay,
So
so that was just the question. So I got
that,
very
that,
confused looking at this.
that's the question. You can use it if you want because some people feel mesmerized. It's a very relevant number, but the old traditional way is arithmetic and geometric proportions.
Okay. That was the only confusion. I was
Okay.
like, okay, so how does that match?
That's the way it works. I thought that you were going to mention something else, and you said you
No,
are.
no, I just got very confused. I thought, okay, so
No,
how did he matched it?
that's the reason. Any more questions?
Yes, well, it's more of a comment. I just wanna thank you for the lecture.
Welcome.
It's very interesting to delve deeper into like proportion and all the geometrical aspects of
Yeah.
the buildings.
I mean, for example, you might remember, because you were in the summer school last year, you might remember Patrick Webb when he got that big block of plaster and he started with the compass here and there, and then he started to create a shape out of it, a wonderful plaster panel out of it. So that's basically what you get with a geometric proportion.
Yes. Yes, and the breakdown of the Milan Cathedral and the church was very interesting to see, analyze it with geometrical figures and proportions. Very
Gothic
interesting.
architecture is fully geometrical. It's very, I would say, rather than fully, very geometrical. And Gothic, and the thing is that it is such because the builders, the Gothic builders, we have to remember as well, they were illiterate people. They didn't know how to read. They didn't know how to write, but they knew how to draw. But they didn't have the perfectionist tools that we have nowadays. That didn't impede them to draw. One of the ways they used to do for drawing is that they were plastering a whole wall, and then with a very sharpened a pencil, or a very sharpened metal pencil, a very sharpened metal compass, they would do all the tracing while the plaster was still wet. Then the bishop would come and they would show them the design, and then the bishop would comment, and then they would execute it. That's the way they did. That's why everything is geometrical. And when they had to draw the structure, they needed to do geometrical because someone needed to build not only the arches, but also the coffers where the arches were built. I mean, there is these days a couple of videos on Instagram running about someone in the Middle East building some bolts in the old style, and they do the thing of pulling out and dismantling the whole coffer, pulling it to the ground, and then you hear, if you hear with care, you can hear a little bit the cracks of the stone just fully settling down. Those cracks are not bad. That needs to happen because it's the moment in which the coffer stops supporting the the stones, and the stone has to rely on each other. It's a very beautiful moment, very dangerous one as well. So that was the moment in which, if there was a problem, it would appear there. If there was not a problem in there, there wouldn't be any more problem for the time being.
Okay, thank you. And I also have a project I've been working on.
Okay.
Maybe later you can give me your
You want to show it?
comments. Okay.
I think everyone can share a screen. Yes, I think that now everyone can share.
Just a minute.
Yeah, take your time. Any more questions in the meantime? Anyone else who want to comment?
I wanted to say thank you so much, Pablo, because
You're welcome.
I was very confused about this topic. You talk about the golden ratio, and I think there should be absolutely much more people like you who knows so well about what they're talking about. And I want to thank you for giving your time
I
for
think
this space. So interesting.
you're welcome. Thank you very much for your kind comment. I think the problem is that the golden section, the phi number, is such a big, powerful number that it's hard to believe that it doesn't comply with classical architecture. But once you analyze the nature of the number, which is an irregular number, and the way people understood numbers back then, is when you say, why do we have the number p? Why? Because it's impossible to explain the number p unless you use the letter p. And why did they choose p? Because the Greeks were using alpha, beta, omega, delta, gamma, etc., to express 0 to 10. And still nowadays, if you go to Greece, they still use the letters for the numbers in some cases, especially if you want to sound like old style Greek, not classic Greek, but old style, like 50 or 60, 100 years ago Greek, you would use still alpha, beta, omega for the numbers. So that's what you get. So imagine or imagine the Roman numerals. How in heavens are you going to express p in Roman numerals? And actually, when who discovered p? P was by not Archimedes. When Archimedes, was Archimedes? No, Pythagoras, or whoever discovered p. I don't want to say one that wasn't. So whoever the Greek mathematician who discovered the relation of p, he named p because he was not able to express that number. That's why phi also is phi, because it was impossible to express that number in normal numerals. And it wouldn't be possible until thousands of years later, once the Indians and then the Arabs bring the numbers as we know now. The Mayans were having a very complicated system to put numbers. It would have been impossible for them to use phi. Same the Chinese, same everyone. That doesn't mean that they couldn't understand phi. That means that once you put that name and then you want to convert it into the number, you want to convert it into real measure, it's impossible to do. Okay, what do we have here?
Okay, so this is a counter proposal for a project. And it's basically like a master plan with 8 villas. And this is
I just want to say goodbye and thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Dario. See you soon.
Bye.
And say hi
See
to
you
Federico.
soon.
Thank
I
you.
hope
Bye.
so.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay, so and
Okay.
I thought it would be interesting to apply some of the classic concepts that we've been mentioning into this villa design. So here is the like the first layout, and this is the living room and the dining room. And then I kind of wanted to have it be symmetrical and be open for possible modifications, like use it to, I don't know if my mouse is,
Yeah, I can see your mouth.
okay, so these are the circulation elements. This is the front axis.
Uh-huh.
And if the people want like more rooms, it can be added on this side, like as you see here. So in the front elevation, mm, is this one, and this is the back
Oh,
elevation.
okay.
So what are your comments? Or
I think that let's just let me get the pencil. Okay, I think that the first element that I see here is we have a very big living space. This is like a terrace, no?
yes, I think the one that you selected is both the terrace and the living room. This is the
Okay, so
actual living room, and this is the columns to go outside to the terrace here. This is the back terrace, which you can see here.
okay. And then, I mean, I'm just trying to understand the plan. Then we have a massive, very beautiful staircase here as you enter. Very good. Then we have, these are 2 bedrooms, no?
Where?
This is, I see 1 bedroom here. One, and this is
Yes.
this one.
Yes, these are 2 rooms. This can be a guest bedroom, and this is supposed to be a kitchen. So
I see. What is
yes.
what is this?
Where? The stairs?
The green one. The green
Oh,
one.
this is just a patio between these 2 rooms.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Like
I mean, I'm just trying to understand, because before we jump onto the style, which obviously is a sketch, and I mean we can comment on it. I want to understand the floor plan. Then
Okay.
in here, which I'm going to draw in brown, what is all this part?
This is the guests bathroom, and this is also another location for a kitchen. So this can the one in red, now that I remember, I turned it into a studio. So the kitchen is in the, like, this is the service area, the kitchen
Much
and
better.
bathrooms.
Much better that way, for a simple reason. I mean, if you're having your dining table here, your kitchen needs to be here, so that
Yes.
everything is served directly from the kitchen. Because I mean, I might look a bit posh here, but if the fillet gets cold, you have ruined your steak. So if your
Yes.
kitchen is here, by the time it arrives here, it's cold. So unless we are adding like additional ways of etc. That's why when you see all these big palaces, you have the kitchen in the basement, but then all of them were having like a servery. They were having a
Yes.
space to prepare the food with warm plates, etc. So this is a good point. Obviously, I mean, you have shown the bathroom as big as the living room, but that's just because it's a sketch. So the
Yes.
thing, what is this element here that I'm going to outline in purple? Is it just something, or is it a staircase?
Yes, that's the staircase for the lower level, which is like the where the pantry is and all the service area, like storage.
Okay. I think that from what I see on the rear facade, you can have quite a view. I mean, I know you're putting a fountain, so then that's okay. So forget about that. So I think that what I see here is that we have a lovely vestibule You have a bedroom as soon as you enter into the vestibule, and then you have another door taking you to the study, and then you have a patio in between, which I mean is like it's nice because it's giving you light to this part of the vestibule, but at the same time, it's a bit. I mean, why? I mean, I would say why not? So I like the idea. What I would do, I would flip. I would put the studio first, and then
Okay.
the bedroom at the bottom. Why? Because if you're receiving guests in your studio, you don't want them to walk around your house. You want them to come directly to your studio, especially if you're having an open room like this. So imagine that the kids are playing around and it's all messy, etc. Then you need to you don't want them to see all the mess in the living room, which again is a question, is a reason to say, okay, why are we having this open plan? But that's next one. My next comment,
Okay.
like we have here a very beautiful area. We have a dining, we have a sitting area here. It's a bit of an uncomfortable question because we all like to be very cultural, etc. But where is the TV in that room?
Oh, okay. So is it just like an outdoor terrace, like with a table and two chairs?
No. I
Oh,
mean
you
in
mean in the living room?
the living room. What does the TV go in the living room?
No, this is just for formal occasions, but I think it could go over the like in a wall with a pretty frame. I don't
Okay,
know. It's
but that's what I mean. I mean, if you're telling me that it's just a formal reception room, which is
yes.
is perfect, then I would say if it's a formal reception room, I would find a way of adding a wall somewhere. Doesn't have to be there, but somewhere to separate the formal reception room from the dining room.
Okay.
Because it's if it is becoming a formal room, let's completely formalize it. And then if you want to have like a more informal snack or family room, you still have this or this. I would feel inclined for this one. Why? Because it's better connected with the terrace and the wonderful staircase that you have designed.
Okay.
And then in the first floor, we will have all the family bedrooms, however they need to go. So that's it. But I think that in the entrance, it is important to focus on the sequence. And that's what I am asking, because the moment that it's very difficult to put a TV on an open space, on an open plan,
Okay.
because TVs are horrible. They are
Yes.
horrible to deal with. I mean, even if you don't know, I only watch documentaries of, I don't care. The TV is still a horrible object to be placed, of course, in a traditional design, but also in a super modernist and sleek design. It's very hard to place a TV in any place that is not a wall or close to a wall. So that's what I'm asking, because you have very nice galleries, very nice elements around, and that's where you need to think about all that for formality. Now, coming back to the elevations. I mean, now it's coming me. I can see here you have the garage, the entrance to the garage. So I guess
Mhm.
that there will be a connection from the garage to this staircase so that you end up somewhere here when you are coming.
Yes, both stairs.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I like that you have done the rusticated ground floor. And I mean, what I am not sure, I mean, this is something that obviously from this sketch you need to make it progress further, is which style do you want to go for with this? Because the whole thing is it's not fully symmetrical. It has what you call sometimes local symmetries, where you have elements that are symmetrical by themselves and then they are composing. So we have an overall symmetry because you have this balance of the two wings, but then it's very nice that it's not fully symmetrical. And the reason is because it's not when you are composing buildings, and we will see in the next two classes in the elevations, You can be either very, 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 very formal, and then that means that we're going for a very Georgian terrace house, Palladian scheme, a double symmetry, super strict, or we need to go a bit more picturesque, which allows also us for a more flexible plan. And in this case, you have go for something a bit more picturesque, which at the same time means that if we cannot go for a full high neoclassical, will be too rigid for the situation. It would be like this talking about dressing. This is a smart. This is a sort of a smart casual situation. If you tell me that you want, it's imagine, no, it's you're a smart casual gathering, and then you're telling me, Pablo, I want to come with a tuxedo, and I say, no, you can't. It's a tuxedo is too much. But you tell me, oh, can I come with a bow tie? I say, oh, you will look perfect with a bow tie. Can I come with a tie? And I say, yes, you can come with a tie. The bow tie and the tie will be the maximum. So the tie will be the most formal, the bow tie will be one level informal, but I would say probably no one is coming with a tie, so you don't need to if you don't want to. So what how translated into the language, what does this mean? Is that we are going to be, you need to be classical, but you don't need to be hyper neoclassical, and we need to operate a little bit with a design by deletion. So that means that to assume that there is going to be elements, for example, let's say let's say this gallery, this entrance here with a beautiful gallery, etc. So you can compose this as a typical neoclassical feature with your column, your pedestal, your balustrade, all the elements. You will need to ensure an entablature here, which is missing, and then you have on top you have more pedestals. But then the cornice of the overall building doesn't have to be the cornice of the order above, can be the cornice of an imaginary giant order, and then this cornice will give you much more presence than a tiny whiny cornice in there. Also, you have used the rustication for the ground, and at the same time I can see like very big powerful rusticated elements. Do you want to take the rustication to the upper floors or just keep it on the ground?
Just keep it on the ground. I think here I was just
okay,
doing like how the pieces would be if they were like made with cast cement or something like cast stone. I also did something with like in the posterior facade here where I divided all the columns and bases. Do you think that
what you're missing here, you can do it, it looks very nice, but it misses the whole entablature. So you have put the pedestal, the column, pedestal and column, you need entablature to divide them. So the horizontal line that you have shown is that you can do it because at the same time here it looks like you have a double window, which means that you are not going to have anything at all.
Yes, this is the stairs.
Okay, so that's what I mean. I mean, it's a very it's a fun elevation. It's an elevation to have fun with. So and because this is fun, this is not a serious social event. We need to you need to apply the rules in a case by case scenario. So because if we want a properly neoclassical facade, I would say, okay, so first point, these two guys need to look the same. Maybe let's go for pediments, or maybe we go for pediments, and then this one has a carved pediment, or maybe say no, this is going to be like a turret with a sort of a mansard, and then we are going to have another mansard in here. So yes, and then I mean we have like big dormers in here and in here, and here we keep our entablature, and then we keep all the other things. So that this will be if we're telling me, no, I want to be super formal, but I don't think it is the case. From what I see, I think that you want to go much more fun. So
yes,
operate a little bit with design by dilation. If you want to have 2 orders, I would concentrate the 2 orders in here.
Which order do you think fits best with this kind of like composite or eclectic? Like which order is more flexible for?
I would say I would use, obviously you have for the whole base is rustic or Tuscan. The ground floor I would go for Doric. But then for the upper floor, you can go for a Corinthian if you want to, because why not? So you can go for a Corinthian or a composite if you want to be quirky. If you want to be more rational, you could go Ionic on the first, Doric on the ground, or Corinthian and composite if you want to go super fancy.
Okay.
That would be my advice. But I would say that if you go for a Doric or a Tuscan, I would say if you go for a Tuscan on the ground or a Doric without triglyph, I know that I said at the beginning, don't go for triglyph, but you go for a Doric without triglyphs. And then on top, I wouldn't have an Ionic because again, the Ionic is like you're having fun in a party, and then the nerdy comes with all his acts and things like that. And so no, the Ionic will be like the party pooper nerdy coming. Oh yeah, no, you're making fun about this, but actually, so that's. I think this house is more for a relaxed Tuscan and a pretty Corinthian. So it's a house to have fun.
Yes.
So it's not a serious house. If you had chosen another scheme, I would say no. You go for a beautiful Ionic arcade overlooking at this. But I think that the moment you have gone for more volumes and higgledy-piggledy, I think that you need to the architectural approach in terms of classical language has to be as well higgledy-piggledy.
Okay.
You need to have fun. No, it's a bit that this is a bit like when the kids go to open the parents or the father or the mother's wardrobe, and then they put all the clothes at the same time. No, it's like especially the girls. No, they put the high heel and the dress and the hat and the foulard, or the boys just put the shirt and the tie and and instead of putting the blazer, they just put a normal jacket and then the shoes. So it's something like that, not putting all the clothes that you have at the same time. Why? Because we're having fun. So that's it. So when you go eclectic, you need to go for more fun. You cannot be, and that's why they have put like the nerdy coming into the party. You are making a joke about something, and then he said, no, actually this didn't happen like this, it's happening like that. No, or imagine, I don't know, I mean, if you say this famous phrase, let them eat cake. No, you want to be very nasty with someone. No, let them eat cake. And then, no, actually Marie Antoinette never said let them eat cake. It was Madame de Montespan who said it. No, come on, you are ruining the whole thing. So
Okay.
that's a bit what I mean, that it's good to, especially with some eclectic approach, you need to be eclectic in that.
Okay. And the other element that you suggested that went through all the height, like, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Okay. So imagine that you're having full column with its cornice, frieze, and then you have your all your elements here. No, this is a standard order.
Okay.
So then you obviously, I mean, in this case, you need to leave more space for the cornices, and this is something that I mean, I say a lot to everyone. Remember, when you are doing all these designs, that we as architects, we think that we want to have as much light as possible inside my interior. Your client will come at all the lights, the windows all the way up, sometimes even touching the slab. And then you forget that in the inside, you need to leave a space for the cornice, the window architrave, and the curtain pelmet. And gosh, the curtain pelmet is very big. And if you tell me, I don't want curtain pelmets because it's from old ladies, I want to have a curtain bar. The curtain bar is very big. So bear in mind that you need to leave a considerable amount of space. I would say I don't like using metric dimensions because it might be not enough, but I would say minimum for 40 to 50 centimeters between the window head and the bottom of your slab, because you will need at least 10 to 15 centimeters for your architrave, depending on the width of your window, if you don't want it to do too ridiculous. And the cornice needs to be at least 20 centimeters to look consistent. Otherwise, you need to go for different type of cornices that are very ornated and are very expensive. And they are very expensive because the cheap ones look horrible, and you need to go for the expensive, good quality ones. While if you go for a running molding but thick, but allow for a bigger space, you can go for a cheaper molding. So bear all those things in mind, because in the worst scenario, you can always risk that the interior designer is going to come to you and tell the client, look, the architect hasn't designed the windows properly. I want them to be lower down. And then your client, oh, you didn't think about it. You have to lower down the windows. And now your beautiful composition is done, and you need to lower the windows. So that's a pain. So because otherwise, because don't, so be always careful, mindful of what is happening on the inside when you're doing the windows. Leave the space, take a look, walk around, see the precedent, and see the distances that are kept, and you will realize. And when you see them, think, okay, I have a cornice, I have this, I have the pelmet. Okay, now I understand how the building works.
Okay, thank you, Pablo.
You're very welcome. You want to show anything else, or it was just these two ones?
Well, this was like just a general master plan, and my idea was to have like a higher density in the center with a park and with a small chapel. And I don't know if you have any comments on this elevation.
When you see higher density, does it mean that these buildings here are like multi-residential buildings?
The ones on some are like townhouses, but look like a full building, and the others are just like commercial on the first floor and apartments on the upper floors, but it's just like 3 levels.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, so it's that's what I wanted to know. So there is more people living here, several families.
Yes, multifamily.
And then on the sides you have villas where only one family or maybe two families live, in the sense that it looks like one house, but it's actually two, no?
Yes, that's the idea.
Okay. I mean, I think it works. I mean, I think that what you need to try to bear in mind, which is what I'm seeing here, is that here you have a cul-de-sac. You see here?
Oh yes, this is just like the circulations ends with the roundabout. This is just the access for the.
Yeah, what I don't know is there any way you can manage to create a sort of I don't know. I mean, obviously, I mean, this is going to totally destroy your design, and I'm not going to tell you to do it, but I'm thinking
Go for it.
You do the design in such a way that you enter from this way, and then you turn around this way. Even you still can keep these two ones, that this is perfect. But you see here, I mean, you are creating a circulation. It's not just one direction. Think about the blood vessels in a body. It's not like in the invertebrates, in the insects, the whole circulation system is unidirectional, and then when the blood ends, it's pumped onto the organs and then reabsorbed. So you want something that goes and come back. That's my comment. So that the flow is nicer. So it doesn't look like it's an end, it's just a continuation of it. That's what I'm
Okay.
trying to explore. because other than
Okay.
that, it looks nice, but because it's a close community, it's not a very big one. So
Yes.
and obviously the plot is very narrow, so that's what I don't know if with
Yes.
the nature of the plot you will be able to have that, but it might be worth having a try.
Yes, it's 1,000 meter, 100 meters front. So the lots were like 50 by like around 50.
So how much is
That's a hundred, yes.
100 meters?
Yes, 100 meters.
Oh, okay, then it's
I mean,
complicated.
I still need to check the scale. This was just like a sketch of circulation. Like the idea was just to the previous idea is just to have a central road and no like central space. But I mean it's just like a proposal, but the space is limited and like the idea is to maximize the lots without too much circulation space.
One thing that you could do, because I see that you are clearly accessing from here, is think about a system in which you enter and you leave. You have an in and out system
Okay.
that then the way it will work is that you can divide internally your plots, maximize them as you want, and then you can decide if you want to have the plots. I'm going to draw, for example, if you want them. No, actually, no. They will need to be like this. You will need to have like a sort of detached property, something like this, and then you divide. So you have like big villas.
Okay.
Or they can also be. So this could be a format. You could have another format in which what you are having is something like this. So you have like a long back garden. It will depend on how many properties you want to get. And then I mean I quite like the idea of having something in the center. You still can keep your higher density center, and then maybe there is a couple of roads. So you have a sort of a basic grid, and then maybe you can have like an internal pathway
Okay. Yes.
that is connecting all the houses from the back, so that the people can access in golf buggies, for example. So that could be an idea, because on those 100 meters you can fit all that. Another possibility could be that you keep all the density at the entrance, and then you keep the lower densities as you pass by.
Okay. Yes, makes sense too.
But definitely the problem is that with 100 meters, you don't have much space for being very abstract or creative, because what you have done is very nice, but that could be if instead of 100, you have there a kilometer. So
Yes.
that's what I was asking you. What's the scale? Because you will need to turn it down a little bit. That doesn't mean that it's not going to look like that. That means that maybe the center looks a little bit like that, but then the position of the plots will be completely different.
Okay.
But looks interesting. Look, I would
Yes.
love
And
to
also, sorry.
yeah. Tell me.
And also they have some buildings already here. That's why I had to move the entrance to this side.
But I think that the entrance to the site is good, because it allows you a sort of in and out circulation. I mean, I'm thinking actually it doesn't have to be like this. It can be like this, and imagine that here and here something, you have the two most desirable
Yes.
houses. Why? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Then maybe in just I mean I'm just talking for the sake of talking. Then maybe here in front of those two big houses, you have your big square,
Mhm.
and then the rest is just, you have here your two existing buildings, and then the rest is just paired houses. And then yeah, they are all connected with another axis, sort of pedestrian axis with the square, or you still have the square in the center, and then you have residential either side. So either system would work very nicely.
Yes. Thank you for the ideas. A lot to think about, but it's nice to consider other possibilities of circulation and um, arrangement.
It's a complicated plot. It's a complicated plot. So
Mhm.
you will need to try several ones. I think that what you have done is nice, but it needs a return. If not, otherwise it's like all the thought that you have put in the center, which is very beautiful and very nicely done. It loses a bit the appeal. Maybe if you want to keep this idea of sort of this sort of circulation, maybe what you have at the end is a higher density area. Maybe so.
Okay.
That's one option. It's just to prevent ending on that little appendage, which is like the tail of of a dog. No, it's
Yes. And also they can access through like these diagonals, like, but I wanted the entrance straight. So, but yeah, I
but
think the two plots on the back on here was also interesting with the circulation in here.
I think it's just try to avoid the cul-de-sac. I mean, the cul-de-sac can still be the roundabout, but I would say try to avoid the cul-de-sac.
Okay.
It might be impossible to get to avoid it, but try.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. So we have some people who have stayed until the end. And yeah, the people have been saying goodbye. And well, I mean, if you don't have any more questions,
I have a question, actually.
of course, yes.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the lecture. Very interesting, as always. And you showed us an image.
Yes. Which one?
It was like a facade with a human figure in front, or just juxtaposed. And I found interesting because you talked about the symbolic relation
Which
that
one?
has
This one?
yeah, this one. You talked about the symbolic relation that has been lost today.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know a bit more about this, or if you have like some book or source.
Yes. And for
About
the
this
symbol,
information.
recently, actually, the people from the IBAT are publishing a very good magazine called Baluarte, and that you can, and obviously you can very easily read it in Portuguese. And there is an article from architect called Alex Keys where he talks about that.
Okay. How did you write the name?
Baluarte.
No, the name of the architect.
Alexander Keys.
Okay. It's Kiss.
Keys, yeah, Keys like Keys.
Okay.
I mean, he could have been here today. I mean, he couldn't join, but I mean, he's one of the usuals that come. So if I see him, if he comes and see, because I see him a lot, so we are friends here in London. So if he comes another time, I will tell him, oh, Alex, can you please talk about the symbolic component?
Okay, great.
But yeah,
But do you have any books or something that talks about it, or any more information?
about proportion. I mean, one of the good ones is Beauty, Memory, and Unity. There is another one called The Symbolism of the Christian Temple. Very interesting as well. And I think that the problem of all this is that it seems that you need to extract from reading here, reading there, reading a little bit from one, reading a little bit from another. I would say a good one is Leonardo Benevolo, History of the Renaissance Architecture. that's very good to understand a little bit how the symbolic component starts to appear. Because I mean, here I have been talking about the human body, but in the Renaissance there was another super interesting debate about the rustic hut, because and how to integrate the the classical architecture, or the concept of classical architecture, with Christianism, a pagan context with Christianism. And they found a way of saying that the primitive hut was actually the first hut that Adam and Eve had to build after being evicted from the paradise. And that appears actually in this manuscript, from this book from Giorgio Martini. One of the miniatures is actually Adam building the primitive hut. So there is a lot of that sense, that symbolic transition, that transition from Gothic to Renaissance. Leonardo Benevolo talks a little bit about that, but it's something that you only get the full picture. You need to read here, you need to read that. You cannot read a single book, because each book is focused on the author's line of research.
Okay.
And sometimes, I mean, for example, I was discussing guy today with another colleague. There's this beautiful one, the Church Building as a Sacred Place by Duncan Stroik. It's very good, very interesting, but it gives you, it's about church building. It's not about the whole symbolism.
Yeah.
Did you see? So you need to read several ones to get in there. I would say as well that the Spanish edition of Vitruvius, the 1787 edition of Nortificence, if you manage to read well in Spanish, it's very good, because you get that. It was translated by a priest, so he incorporates all the, whatever he thinks is necessary. He brings a Christian interpretation wherever he thinks is not necessary. He brings an archaeological interpretation. So he's never giving you a pagan interpretation. So it's interesting of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect.
Also, I wanted to show you my counter proposal for the Belfast stories.
No.
Yeah, no, because it was
Not
postponed.
today.
Yeah, it was postponed.
No, but I'm not seeing any Belfast counter proposal until the competition has
finishes.
Yeah, no. I know it has been postponed, but
Okay.
remember that this is going to be this video might be Alvaro might publish parts of the video,
Oh yeah, of course.
and that's why I'm not seeing any counter proposal for that, because I was also asked by the organizers not to, because I wanted to, and they asked me no, because then people can complain that you have been guiding some people and others not, etc. And then in a future one, I might be flooded by people wanting to ask. So I am happy to do any revision, any comment after once the winner is pronounced, etc. I'm happy to see it, but at this stage, I am not. I promise not to do any review.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Apologies for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Same thing because I will be announcing very soon, probably for the end of the month, another competition. And that one again, the Classic Planning Institute is heavily involved. So I cannot comment on anyone, because obviously it can be perceived as bias. So I'm apologies for that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
So our next class is going to be on the, let me just grab the screen. No, it's not this one. Our next class no, before that, because obviously this is being, I usually do a quick reminder of all the summer schools that are available. Obviously the conference, Beauty and Ugliness in Architecture conference in Oslo. All of you are invited to attend. It's going to be very fun with a lot of activities planned, not only the lectures, but the activities. We're bringing a lot of people from all over the world, so it will be a good opportunity for networking. I know that some of you have already done the summer schools, but those of you who haven't, this year I'm promoting particularly 4, because they are the 4 ones in which I am to to more to less degree involved. I will be very involved in the Bruges Summer School, maybe a little bit involved on Let's Build a Beautiful City, but because of good personal relationship with organizers, I am also promoting the summer school in Kongs, the summer school in Oaxaca, very good in Mexico. So for those of you who are in Mexico, it will be very good with Flavio and Ishtar and the others. So go. And there is also a summer school in Spain. This year is in Ronda, in the south of Spain. So go and enjoy the south of Spain in August, which will be very hot but very beautiful. As I said, as I always say, follow your local chapter of Inbound, subscribe to the Classic Planning Institute for more information. If you want to know more about classical architecture, you want to actually know how to draw all the orders, we are accepting applicants for the Year 1 certificate program that will start in September, October this year. So you still have time to apply. And our next session will be Saturday, the 1st of March, where we'll be talking about the acanthus leaf. So it will be quite an exciting class, only devoted to the acanthus leaf. Bring your paper and pencil because we will be drawing. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing all of you. I think that all of you are in our group in WhatsApp. If not, you have my email, you have everything, our social media, and anything you need. I will be more than happy to help you accepting the Belfast competition.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you, Paulo. See you.
Thank you very much, and see you in 2 weeks' time, and see you in social media. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Pablo. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.